The Clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Water Special Measures Bill, Lords, as amended in the Public Bill Committee, to be considered.
Now,
we will begin with Government New Clause 18, with which it will be convenient to consider other new clauses and amendments as listed on the selection paper. I call the Minister to move New Clause 18. Minister.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And what a delight it is to be back in the Chamber debating this transformatory bill. I will, of course, keep my opening comments brief, as I know many want to speak, and I will be responding to amendments tabled by honourable members when closing the report stage debate after honourable members have spoken to them, as is established practice. But I'd like to start by thanking all members of the Public Bill Committee for their careful consideration and scrutiny of this bill, and dare I even say, camaraderie in discussions and debates. It's clear that this is an area everyone acknowledges is in need of change and reform. I would also like to thank the chairs, the Honourable Member for Brigg and Immingham, and my honourable friend, the Member for Ealing Central and Acton. It was a pleasure to serve under them as chairs. Following committee stage for the bill, I have had several further insightful conversations with members across the House on this bill and on the amendments tabled by the Government for consideration at report stage, which I will take the opportunity to speak to now. So I will start by addressing Government Amendment 4, which is a minor and technical amendment that ensures Clause 10 encompasses new enforcement functions arising from the changes made to Clause 2 of the bill in the other place. This amendment clarifies that cost recovery powers for the Environment Agency, expanded by the provisions in Clause 10, also extend to costs incurred when enforcing the requirement to publish implementation plans, a requirement that was added at the Lords report stage after cross-party discussions and collaboration. This amendment also clarifies the EA cost recovery powers concerning both pollution incident reduction plans and implementation reports are available for plans covering areas that are wholly or mainly in Wales, as well as plans covering England, which are already included in Clause 10. These clarifications ensure that the EA regulators in both England and Wales will be able to fully recover costs for the extent of their water company enforcement activities and carry out their duties and functions effectively. Moving on to Government Amendments 5 to 7, which the Government has tabled in order to commence Clause 1 upon royal assent. This will give Ofwat and companies certainty on when the powers to make rules on remuneration and governance will come into force, and will therefore be useful to companies in planning for the 2025-26 financial year. Commencement of Clause 1 at royal assent will ensure Ofwat can implement their rules as soon as possible, following their statutory consultation with relevant persons, which include the Secretary of State, Welsh Ministers and the Consumer Council for Water. I know that some members have expressed concerns around the timeline over which Ofwat's rules will come into effect, so I hope this alteration to the commencement provisions for Clause 1 will reassure those members that the Government and the regulators are absolutely committed to ensuring Ofwat's rules are put in place as quickly as possible. Turning now to New Clause 18, which is the most substantial of the Government amendments tabled. As I have stated before, this Government is a government of service, and we are absolutely committed to taking action to address water poverty. We are working with industry to keep existing support schemes under review to ensure vulnerable customers across the country are supported. We also expect companies to hold themselves accountable for their public commitment to end water poverty by 2030, and will work with the sector to ensure appropriate measures are taken to deliver this. That is why we have tabled this new clause, which adds to the existing powers to provide for special charging arrangements for customers in need. This new provision will enable water companies to provide consistent support for consumers across the country. It will also allow for automatic enrolment on any future scheme and broader information sharing between public authorities and water companies. And the clause imposes a requirement for consultation on any future scheme. This new clause also amends the Digital Economy Act 2017 to ensure that water companies identify eligible customers and ensure they get the full support to which they are entitled. Yes.
Well, I'm grateful to the Minister and indeed grateful for her ongoing discussions about drainage and local authorities and other water-related matters. Nevertheless, on this issue of water poverty, can she confirm that either as part of this bill or as an adjunct to it, when water companies fail to deliver an adequate service in new build situations, so where new houses are built, but the water infrastructure is insufficient to furnish those new houses with a proper supply of water, how will this bill and how will the regulatory environment she's just described allow those customers to get their entitlement and free themselves from water poverty, as you put it?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention and also for the many times he's talked to me about IDBs since becoming Minister. I think in the question of if customers aren't getting the service to which they're entitled, then that is something absolutely that we should be taking through Ofwat and through the regulators as well. More than happy to pick up with him outside of this meeting about that. So I hope that members across the House will agree that this new clause is a welcome addition to the bill, ensuring that government has the necessary powers in place to bring forward secondary legislation in future once we have thoroughly considered all options for improving the support available for vulnerable customers. So before I finish, I would like...
I thank her for giving way. Does she agree with me that it's supremely unjust that in Wales, customers face some of the highest bills for their water, despite having some of the lowest incomes in the United Kingdom?
I think obviously the reasons that bills have had to increase is because we've had a record levels of underinvestment in our infrastructure. This has meant that bills have had to increase through the latest price review. However, the new clause that we're sort of talking about at the moment is intended to bring greater fairness. And for companies and customers who are struggling, of course, that it is really important, and I'm sure he will, as the local Member of Parliament, be talking to the water companies and ensuring that all of the support mechanisms available the customers are informed about them, they know how to access them, and they're getting everything to which they're entitled. Go on then.
I'm extremely grateful to the Minister for giving way. As she will know, when Labour last left office, just 7% of outfalls were monitored. It is now, I'm pleased to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, 100%. But does the Minister not agree that new clause 16 would ensure that the fines collected from polluting water companies through the Water Restoration Fund founded by this side of the House in 2022 would ensure that money would be used to improve and prevent further deterioration of our waterways, including precious chalk streams, and would she now do what we all look for ministers to do most often, which is a pirouette at the dispatch box, recognise the rightness of the cause and change course?
I thank the honourable gentleman, who is indeed an eager beaver in this debate. Much as I don't wish to pour water on his enthusiasm, I will, of course, respond to all of the amendments that are laid in it at the end of report stage, as protocol expects. Though I hope he's able to contain his excitement and is looking forward to the final comments, of which I'll make regarding that, and I'll be practising my pirouettes in anticipation. So I'd also like to pay special thanks to the Welsh Government, the Deputy First Minister and the officials who've worked open and collaboratively with the UK Government throughout the development and passage of this bill. I would also like to thank the Senate for their consent, which we received on the 21st of January. I look forward to continuing to work closely with our Welsh counterparts to protect our rivers, lakes and seas, particularly those that cross our borders.
I'd like to thank my honourable friend. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable friend for all her work on bringing this bill forward. Would she agree that in the 6 months we've been here, we have made much more progress on banning bonuses to water bosses than the other side did in 40 years?
I think that is an excellent point, well made by my honourable friend. So I hope all honourable members agree that the amendments tabled by the Government will only strengthen this bill, and I beg to move new clause 18.
Special provisions in charges schemes.
The question is that the new clause time. Before I call the Shadow Minister, we have a lot of contributions and quite a tight deadline. Backbenchers will be limited to 4 minutes. I call the Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity today to discuss this vital issue of water quality once again. As His Majesty's most loyal opposition have maintained through the passage of this bill, we believe this is just an attempt to copy and paste some of the work done by the previous Conservative government and the measures taken to identify the problem. we won't shy away from the fact that the Conservative government was the first to identify the scale of the sewage problem and actually start to address it. As my right honourable friend, the member for Beverley, has just said, when Labour left office in 2010, only 7% of storm overflows were monitored. When we Conservatives left office last year, 100% were monitored. And our landmark Environment Act paved the way to improving the quality of our precious waters. However, we are under no illusion that there is always more that can be done, and we have always said that we will seek to work constructively to make this bill as effective as possible. In that spirit, therefore, I would very much like to thank the Minister for her willingness to discuss matters of the bill with me and with colleagues across the House, as well as Minister Baroness Hayman in the other place, who showed an equal willingness to listen to suggestions from colleagues. Can I also thank members of the Bill Committee for their constructive approach, and for all of the Bill, DEFRA and Parliamentary staff supporting this legislation and our scrutiny of it. We welcome that as a result of that dialogue, the bill now includes several improvements in several areas, such as company requirements to produce implementation reports to outline how they envision the commitments they make to improving water quality happen, as well as consideration of nature-based solutions in licensing activities. However, in that same constructive spirit, the opposition is here today to ask the government to go even further. We want the government to back our amendment mandating the Water Restoration Fund, new clause 16, which had cross-party support at committee stage. I'd very much like to thank the good folk of the Conservative Environment Network and Wildlife and Countryside Link for their support and campaigning with this amendment, as well as the Angling Trust for their discussions on this, and also for former MP for Ludlow, Philip Dunn, the former chair of the Environmental Audit Committee, for his assiduous efforts to see this fund introduced.
Will my right honourable friend allow me?
I will.
These are very, very substantial sums. A water company in my region was fined £100 million the year before last. It's vitally important that these amounts do come to our chalk streams, which are in desperate need of them.
I totally agree with my right honourable friend. It's right that if water companies do the wrong thing, that the money that is levied from them is ploughed back into improving the water and not to go back into Treasury coffers. Now, the Water Restoration Fund, since being introduced by the previous Conservative government, provided £11 million for communities to repair their local waterways and restore them to the quality they should be at. I will.
I'm grateful to follow up the point made by our honourable friend just now. This money ultimately will come out from water bill payers. It's going to be ordinary families across the country that will have to contribute to the £100 million fines or whatever is imposed on a water company for that to be taken and then swallowed by the Treasury rather than used to improve water would be a disgrace. And does he not agree with me that the government must accept new clause 16?
I thank my right honourable friend for that intervention, and I'll come on to an amendment that we have also tabled to make sure that if fines are levied on water companies, then customer bills accordingly go down, so that the taxpayers, the bill payers, are not penalised for water companies doing the wrong thing. Now, the government, I know, have made objections both in this House and in the other place to the principle of ring-fencing this funding and the need for Treasury to have flexibility in how they spend this money. But in this specific case, their argument still does not stack up. Where money comes from taxation, ring-fencing is not always the most reliable way to ensure that Treasury is able to have the spending power they need to deliver that spending. But here we are talking about something very different. Fines are much more uncertain and provide less guarantee regarding the amount of money they will bring in. To rely on these funds for day-to-day Treasury spending does not make sense. Ring-fencing these penalties for our Water Restoration Fund is a sensible measure that enables governments to guarantee that they can meet a specific need. Water companies pay the fines for the damage that they have done, and the local communities that are affected are empowered to have their local waterways restored. Again, I think it's worth repeating in the finer detail of our amendment, Madam Deputy Speaker, it should not go ignored that this will also improve chalk streams. It was incredibly disappointing over Christmas that the government revealed that plans from the Conservatives to recover our chalk streams have been abandoned by the government. Given that England is home to over 80% of the world's chalk streams, a failure to act on this issue is neglecting a vital duty to protect a key part of our environment. The government, in light of this, we believe needs to think again about rejecting our important amendment as a matter of principle, a matter of justice in righting wrongs, and a fundamental commitment to water quality. At the heart of the opposition's concerns in the area of improving our waters is that we want to support those most affected when water companies fail to abide by their duties, the British public, as individual consumers, bill payers, and as members of local communities. I want to come on now, to Madam Deputy Speaker, to new clause 19. Customers must not pay the price for the failure of water companies to do their duties, be they financial, environmental or otherwise. As such, we, the opposition, have tabled new clause 19, which would require the DEFRA Secretary of State to make provisions so that where a water company has faced financial penalties for failure to comply with the law, a financial amount equal to those penalties must be removed from the bills of consumers of that water company. This is very important. A toxic cocktail of poor behaviour by water companies and rising bill prices has led to many people feeling they're getting poor value for money and not getting the quality water services they deserve. So by showing a concomitant reduction in customer bills, and that people will see this directly on their statement, they have a real and tangible sign that the poor behaviour is not going unchecked. We know that the government has rejected this amendment previously, but we urge them to think again about this simple yet effective amendment that would do so much to underpin all the work that is being done and protect bill payers. I now want to move on to some of our further amendments, Madam Deputy Speaker. Our concerns about the water industry and finances also extend to what is already in the bill as it currently stands, in particular the provisions for special administration orders in clauses 12 and 13, which we, the opposition, have raised in the other place and in committee stage. Clauses 12 and 13 would give the power for the government to recover any losses it makes because of placing a company into special administration by raising consumer bills. My Conservative colleagues in the other place, Madam Deputy Speaker, sounded the alarm on this issue, and I want to again put on record my thanks to them for doing so. If water companies, through their own failure, require government to place them under special administration, why should consumers foot the bill for failures they have had no influence on or responsibility for, particularly still if a customer's bills will rise as a result of mismanagement from a company they don't even rely on for their services? This runs contrary to the nature of all the action taken in recent years to improve water quality, that companies who are responsible for failing to get their affairs in order must take responsibility. We have all been starkly aware of concerns surrounding the financial resilience of Thames Water, and also many will know Ofwat's Monitoring Financial Responsibility report in November identified 10 companies that needed increased level of monitoring and/or engagement concerning financial resilience. We acknowledge that the government believe that they expect to use special administration orders as a last resort in limited circumstances, but it is the opposition's firm belief that an injustice still remains with people having to pay for companies that they have no connection to. And we have therefore, Madam Deputy Speaker, laid down amendments 26 and 27 explicitly forbidding those prices to be raised for consumers who do not use services by the water company under special administration. We believe this is a fair and reasonable compromise that the government should accept so that we can work to improve the water industry's financial practices. Madam Deputy Speaker, we have also tabled new clause 17, and this amends the Water Industry Act 1991 to insert new rules regarding the limits to the amount of money that can be borrowed by a water company. Regrettably, the government rejected this sensible measure at committee stage, so we are tabling it again to ensure that water companies are not excessively borrowing money, which is ultimately bad for bill payers. When we talk about financial resilience, the heart of the issue is concern around borrowing and over-leveraging in the industry because of that borrowing. So we will be pushing that forward today, Madam Deputy Speaker. We will be also supporting the measures on nature recovery that we tabled at committee stage, and very much we will be looking closely at some of the amendments from the third party trying to abolish Ofwat. They laid this at committee stage, and we mentioned at that stage that there were no specific or explicit measures to actually say what that would transition to. So we believe that that is not a sensible way forward. We note that the government today has spoken about their new Clause 18 that would grant it a power to create a unified scheme of charging arrangements for customers in need of support, regardless of specific supplier, and introduces a consultation for this purposes. While we, the opposition, welcome looking at this, can the government please confirm that in looking at this, they would ensure that other consumers who are not receiving this support would not be faced with rising bills as a result of this? And so it would be interesting to see what the government does with that. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, we urge the government not to waste this opportunity to make this bill properly effective. We all, on all sides of this House, want a clean water system, a healthy water environment, financially resilient water companies, and fairness for the consumer. The government has the opportunity to work towards that with our constructive suggestions made by His Majesty's loyal opposition, and we've made them at all stages of the bill, and we urge the government to take them forward today.
Backbenchers are on 4 minutes. Clive Lewis.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I refer members to the Members' Register of Interests? Can I first of all thank my frontbench DEFRA colleagues for the work they've done on this bill and everything else that they've been doing in terms of the consultation they've also been working on. It's quite clear to most people, most of the public, that England's privatised model of water is not only failing, but it is an extreme ideological outlier. One of the worst in terms of costs and results. I see my the honourable member there chuntering away again in his position. We need long-term, patient approach, especially given the climate crisis. And this is fundamentally incompatible with privatisation. I think we could... I will give way.
In Harpenden and Beaconsfield, while the CEO of Thames Water got £195,000 in bonuses, we saw over 100 days non-stop of sewage in our River Vere, chalk stream. The same now is happening again 1 year later with 1,000 hours non-stop. Would the right honourable member agree with me that this system clearly doesn't work and those bonuses are not setting the right incentives?
I would agree with the honourable lady, and I hope her party comes to its senses at some point, and maybe on the same senses that my party needs to come to, and accept that public ownership is probably, some form of public ownership is going to be the best way to resolve that. First of all, these companies, that's my personal view, I put that on the record. First of all, these companies have legal obligations, first and foremost, to their shareholders. Short-term profit maximisation. When water was privatised, quoting from Unison's recent report on this matter, to ensure the commercial success of companies, the government wrote off all the existing debts of the regional water authorities, that was £6.5 billion in total, and gave private companies £7.7 billion of public subsidies in tax relief on profits. Now, it's come to my attention that even some former chief executives of water companies fear for the future of the industry, because good investors, by and large, have exited. It's now the Macquaries, the vulture capitalists of this world, who dominate shareholding. But this issue goes far beyond regulation. Indeed, our own regulator, Ofwat, has been found wanting. Its own growth duty prioritises business as usual. In other areas, the government has quite rightly recognised and embraced the value of public ownership, such as in rail and in GB Energy. But unfortunately, when it comes to water companies, there seems to be an inconsistency across government policy. Many of us on this side ran on a manifesto commitment to reduce the cost of living. That commitment is one which I think every Labour MP here believes in. But the cost of corruption, of extraction by private water companies should, under no circumstances, as is currently configured in this bill, land on the heads of our constituents, should any of these companies go bust or be taken into special administration. Water is a monopoly industry. That means bill payers and taxpayers are the same. What message would it send to our constituents, if they're asked, either via bills or via tax, to make a payout for the mistakes and excesses of privatised water? I will give way.
Well, to the honourable gentleman, and doubtless the behaviour of the privatised firms should be looked at closely. But the fundamentals of a state-run system for long-term assets like this is they were chronically underinvested. They could never win out in the political battle between schools, hospitals and long-term water infrastructure, and it was only the privatisation that allowed the record investment that's gone in since. That's something he ought to recognise in getting this balance right.
I thank the honourable member for his intervention. I do recognise that, and I, for 1 second, am not calling for nationalisation, which was the model he was talking about. There are a plethora of possibilities of public ownership, from mutualisation all the way through to giving regional authorities more scope, even working with the private sector, but ensuring that the public have a critical say over the future of water. There are multiple ways that public ownership and forms that it can take. So I'm not necessarily in favour of 1970s-style nationalisation, pretty much what they have in Scotland at the moment. But I will ask the front bench to consider new Clause 8 and to ensure that our constituents, the people we came into politics for, do not foot another single penny for the failures of privatised water. Investors, shareholders, creditors, they should be the ones that take the haircut. They should be the ones that foot the bill because of what they've done to our water. This should not be landing on our constituents' heads. This is a political choice, and I would urge my government to make it clear that we will always back the public, not private companies which have got us into this very mess. Thank you.
For the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Tim Farron.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd also like to pay tribute to the Minister herself, the DEFRA Bill team who are in the Chamber today, but also to all of my colleagues who were on the Bill Committee for what was a genuinely enjoyable and collegiate experience, and I hope they'll forgive me for making a few criticisms in the next few minutes available to me. We tabled 44 amendments at committee. You'll be delighted to know only 34 today. I'm not going to speak to all of them. I am failing, and I will not speak to all of them for blindingly obvious reasons. We tabled those amendments because we humbly in the Liberal Democrats, yet enthusiastically, have taken on the mantle in this place and beyond as being the voice for many thousands of campaigners, volunteers and citizen scientists who continue to lead the way in exposing the failures and injustices within the water industry and fighting for meaningful change. We are immensely grateful to them all across the country. Our water industry has become a money-making vessel for speculators who appear to care little for the quality of our rivers, lakes and seas, something which I can tell you is a source of great fury in England's precious Lake District. The water companies accumulated £70 billion in debt since privatisation, while still managing to pay out £83 billion in dividends, which is more than a third of the total spent in infrastructure during that time. In the last full year, water companies paid out £9.3 million in executive bonuses. Thames Water's bonuses doubled to £1.3 million that year. Money leaks out of the industry. Infrastructure is failing, and it is our constituents who pay the price. Meanwhile, the regulatory framework has failed utterly and is not fit for purpose. As I speak, there are £164 million in fines levied against water companies by Ofwat following an investigation 4 years ago, of which they have so far failed to collect a single penny. I will give way. Yeah.
I thank him for giving way on that point. Thames Water has had an increase in the number of pollution incidents, up 40%. In 6 months last year. Meanwhile, they've been issued fines, and it's not changed anything. Would he agree with me that actually what we need is regulation with proper teeth, and that new Clause 25 does exactly that by putting those water companies into special measures when they fail our constituents?
I strongly agree with my honourable friend. The water companies simply do not fear Ofwat or indeed any other part of our fragmented regulatory system. They dwarf them in terms of resources, they flout the limited regulations that they do face, and then they run rings around those regulators, and they obviously get get away with it. The outrage of water companies being permitted just before Christmas to increase water bills by 36% by 2030. What is worse is that a third of customers' bills are being spent on just servicing this debt.
Shame.
A debt that has been in part run up in order to fund excessive dividends. Water companies are already passing on the consequences of their complete financial mismanagement to our constituents, their customers. But this bill could actually enable this to go further and be even worse, because Clause 12 of the bill, as currently drafted, would, and I'm quoting from the government's own explanatory notes here, following the provision of financial assistance by the Secretary of State to a company in special administration, the bill would require a water company to raise amounts of money determined by the Secretary of State from its consumers and to pay those amounts to the Secretary of State to make good any shortfall. In other words, when a water company goes into special administration, there is a cost to the government of ensuring that supply is maintained. The government needs to recoup that cost. Now, that sounds reasonable at first glimpse, but what does not seem reasonable is that bill payers should have to pick up the tab despite them bearing none of the blame for the financial mess a water company finds itself in. And so my honourable friends and I are keen to push Amendment 9, where we make it explicit that it should be the creditors of these companies, the big financial investors who have loaded debt onto the water companies, who should cover those costs instead. This amendment will strike out the government's provision in this bill, which would open up bill payers to carrying the cost of paying off company debt, even in the event of bankruptcy. It has been discussed. I will briefly give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I fear that the government's drive for growth has meant that it's become fearful of tough regulation, like you suggest there, seeing it only as an impediment instead of the basis for a stable economy. So does my honourable friend agree with me that weak regulation is not only bad for consumers and bad for the environment, but also bad for investment over the long run?
I mean, somebody representing the water company or the water industry will say that the water industry, as currently structured, is just deeply unappealing to investors, and so there is a real case for us changing the way and the model of how we structure those companies. When a company does go into special administration, we do not think it's right that innocent customers should have to foot the bill. The management of those companies and their investors and creditors are responsible for the mess the company is in. They took the risks and speculated in order to make money, so it's only right that they should have to cover the costs of the risks that they took, not our constituents. One of the positive aspects of this bill is the government's decision to deploy volunteers, citizen scientists and campaigners to ensure scrutiny of the water industry. Only last week I spent time speaking with the leaders of the Save Windermere campaign and the Clean Up the River Kent group. I enjoyed also getting my hands dirty and my legs very wet alongside the Eden Rivers Trust in the River Eden not long ago too. We are very lucky across the whole country to have passionate, committed, expert volunteers who are dedicated to cleaning up and protecting our precious waterways. Yet we are saddened the government has failed to provide those volunteers with either the resources they need or the power they deserve.
On that point, with my right friend.
Briefly give way. Yeah.
I'm grateful to our friend for giving way. Would he agree that one of the areas of support that such community groups need are the water restoration grants that are absolutely vital and will flow from the water restoration funds, which is the subject of his amendment, and that those funds are vital to cleaning up bathing waters across the country?
They absolutely are. Bathing water status is very, very important. We hope DEFRA will come out with their new criteria soon, so places like the River Kent can bid to be included. Today we therefore propose new clauses 4, 10, 13 and 15, which between them seek to strengthen the hand of those wonderful volunteers, including ensuring that the live database that the government proposes, on which we support, must retain comprehensive historic data. If it does not, then the government is expecting campaigners to be watching that database 24/7. And if they don't have the temerity to, I don't know, go to sleep, look after their kids or go to work, then they may miss something. If we're going to campaign or back campaigners and volunteers, the least we can do is to give them the tools to scrutinise water companies' performance. Knowledge is power. Our amendment would give those campaigners knowledge and power. New clauses 11 and Amendment 14 address the issue of monitoring. Now, events duration monitors tell how long a spill took place. For instance, they tell us in last February, United Utilities spilled into Windermere for 10 hours in one go, but they don't tell us anything, Madam Deputy Speaker, about volume. As a result, they don't tell us enough about the impact of sewage spills on the ecology and wildlife of our waterways. It is, of course, possible to have a long duration trickle and equally possible to have a short duration deluge of sewage into our lakes, rivers and seas. Our new clause 11 insists that water companies should have to measure and report on the volume of discharges, and the regulator should hold them to it. New clause 25 seeks to put into law concrete pollution targets and proper penalties when companies fail to meet them. Those companies which fail to meet these targets will be put into what we're calling special measures, meaning that they would be subject to financial penalties and or being made to undertake specific improvement projects. No water company chief executive is going to quake in their boots if they are not held to targets that are ambitious and enforceable with penalties and that actually mean something. The water industry staff do amazing work, giving us the world's cleanest drinking water, working their socks off to tackle and repair leaks, to bolster the infrastructure, to oversee the operation of wastewater treatment systems and serving our communities. They are just as much victims as their fellow bill payers of the utterly failed system we are faced with. And the system is failed for two key reasons. One, inadequate regulation and a broken ownership and financial model. And secondly, that is why we propose through New Clause 2 the abolition of Ofwat and the creation of a new consolidated super regulator with the power, focus and resource to hold the water industry to account to enforce stronger rules. We also today wish to present New Clause 26 to migrate water companies away from the failed privatised model and towards mutual ownership status. In doing so, we will prevent the water industry being used as a cash cow for speculators where bill payers pay the price through higher bills and sewage-infested rivers and lakes, and instead create a form of ownership where a low-risk with modest but reliable reward model will ensure that we attract responsible investors and prevent money leaking out of the system in the form of unearned dividends and immoral financing of colossal debt. We recognise, in conclusion, the government's decision to present this bill now and to hold out the hope of more radical change later in this Parliament after the recommendations of the Sir John Cunliffe Review. And we confess, however, to suffering from extreme raised eyebrow syndrome today when it was revealed that a former Thames Water executive has been appointed to Sir John's Independent Water Commission, something that doesn't fill us initially with enormous confidence. So, this bill is okay, even good in parts, but it will be significantly better with the amendment we have suggested, and we humbly ask honourable and right honourable members to support those amendments, especially Amendment 9, to give the British people the radical water industry clean-up that they voted for.
Catherine Fookes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for bringing forward this bill so fast in the first 6 months of the government. Yep. It was an absolute honour to be on the Bill Committee with members across the House and engage in constructive discussion. But I must take issue with the member for Westmorland and Lonsdale and his veritable smorgasbord of amendments and new clauses that he's putting forward today, and say that I won't be supporting them, because let's remember this is just the first step in cleaning up the appalling mess we've been left with our water companies, and the Commission will certainly be bringing forward more ideas and more legislation, I'm absolutely sure. So I grew up in the countryside on a farm, and one of my favourite memories was running down through the garden and out into the river at the bottom of the garden, going for a walk, splashing through the streams, and I just took it for granted, and so did my family, that we could just mess about in the streams. And apart from really annoying my mum when I got back by leaving a messy puddle of water on the floor, there was never any fear that I would get sick or that I would be wading through sewage. What a change now to when parents have to worry about their children going into the water. They can't run helter-skelter into the local chalk stream for fear that they will get an ear infection, an eye infection, or perhaps encounter a wet wipe or something much, much worse. So sadly, the health of our two majestic rivers in Monmouthshire, the Wye and Usk, have really suffered over the past 14 years. I've spent many happy hours walking alongside them, seeing herons and kingfishers, and we've had some of the happiest days out as a family there. But these two rivers and the dreadful state that they're in are two really good examples of the 14 years of Conservative failure and flim-flam. We have record levels of illegal sewage dumping in our rivers, lakes and seas, and chronic ongoing diffuse pollution from agriculture. I know in every constituency across the UK there are amazing groups of citizen scientists, and they've really brought our rivers to the fore. I want to pay tribute to some of the best in the UK that are in Monmouthshire. That's Save the River Usk, Friends of the River Wye, and many more. I'm afraid I won't give way because we are under extreme time pressure. As one of the key promises in the election campaign was to work in Parliament to clean up our rivers, Bergen Sharkey endorsed my campaign, and we all understand that when someone like him endorses your campaign, you will be held to account. And that's why I am so pleased that in the last 6 months we have done more than the Conservatives and the Lib Dems when they were in coalition did on
including a water minister.
And I'm proud that we are already standing here debating the Water Special Measures Bill, only 6 months in. The bill will bring criminal charges against persistent lawbreakers, including imprisonment. In addition, the cost recovery powers of regulators will be expanded to ensure that water companies bear the cost of enforcement action taken in response to their failings. We have been left a very difficult legacy due to the disastrous inaction from the Tories and the Lib Dems when they were in coalition. In conclusion, it will take much more work and many years across border with both farmers and the water companies to restore our rivers. But this bill makes an excellent start in cleaning up the horrific mess. It will mean that in future, I hope, parents will be able to allow their children to run helter-skelter into their local rivers and streams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would like to speak on Amendment 2 and 3, tabled in my name, to further strengthen the water bill by making it a criminal offence for water companies to fail to report discharge from emergency overflows, and Amendment 3 to prohibit such discharge in river areas used for aquatic sports, such as the Thames. I have the privilege of representing the towns and villages of Beaconsfield, Mierlo, Bourne End, and the South Bucks villages. We are unfortunately served by Thames water, and we have some of the highest fines in the country. We are blessed with a beautiful waterway setting throughout my constituency, including the River Thames. Our area is rich in water sport clubs, the Mierlo Rowing Club, the Mierlo Canoe Club, the Upper Thames Sailing Club, to name but 3, and also young people and high schools and grammar schools use the Thames for their water sports as well. Amendment 3 would mean that water used for aquatic sports would have the same protection as those for bathing. It establishes that there should be a clear consequence for water companies and their chief executives where they fail to comply with a clear duty to protect the water in which people practice aquatic sports, particularly aquatic sports like rowing. And this is particularly true of Thames Water, Madam Deputy Speaker, and of the Thames. And I appreciate the cross-party support in Bill Committee when these amendments were brought forward. Aquatic sports are an important part of our sporting heritage in this country, but storm overflow discharge into our rivers has adversely affected the health of participants, creating an ongoing health risk to rowing, sailing, canoeing, and other aquatic sports clubs along the Thames and across the country. Many clubs, particularly in places like Mierlo, take their duty of care very, very seriously and are having to put in place their own monitoring systems to protect their members. Amendment 3 would ensure that water used for aquatic sports were put on the same statutory footing as bathing water. It is a time for water companies to take responsibility for ensuring those waters are safe to use and to protect our young people for the future. The amendments set out a reasonable expectation that a water company must not discharge for an emergency overflow in an area within a 1-mile radius of an area used for aquatic sports. The definition of such an area is clearly outlined and further discretion provided for the Secretary of State to determine such areas where needed. This amendment will bring a much-needed support to our vital aquatic sports.
Would my honourable friend give way?
Absolutely.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank my honourable friend and constituency neighbour for giving way.
She will recall that she and I, along with a member for South West Hertfordshire and the former member for Uxbridge and South Ruislip, have held a number of meetings with local stakeholders and the Canals and River Trust about these issues which affect the River Colne, which covers the boundaries of our respective constituencies. Does she share my appreciation of the measures introduced by the last government which ensure that we have effective monitoring? And will she join me in thanking Conservative-led Hertfordshire, Buckinghamshire and Hillingdon councils for the work they've done to ensure that water sports users have access to good quality, clean facilities?
Well said. Thank you. And my honourable friend raises an excellent point of what the previous government did, which was put in monitoring for all waterways so that now we can actually hold water companies to account, and the cross-border and cross-party, but mainly the Conservative councils that worked together to make sure that we were holding Thames Water and other water companies to account. So thank you for that point. And on the Amendment 3, and I was surprised that the government didn't readily accept this amendment because it is non-party political. It is about the needed support for our vital aquatic sports clubs and to further strengthen the protection of waterways used for aquatic sports across the country in waterways such as the Thames and other places across England, and in areas where we see young people accessing waterways where we have storm overflow. I urge the government to accept these reasonable and important amendments to strengthen the bill.
Jessica Toole.
Water quality and sewage pollution is one of the most pressing issues in my constituency, Bournemouth West. In the past year alone, we've had 57 sewage dumps. That's the equivalent of 594 hours of sewage spilled at Bournemouth Pier. Now, many of you will know that Bournemouth Pier is a place that people surf, paddleboard, swim, walk their dogs. It's a magnet for tourism. So this is more than just an environmental issue. It's a public health issue with people getting sick frequently from swimming in the sea. It also has massive economic consequences for my constituency, where thousands of people visit over the summer. It is impacting our reputation, businesses, and also the tourism industry. But it's also a matter of deep pride for my constituents. We're proud to be one of the most beautiful bits of coastline in the UK, often ranked in the top 20 in Europe. And my constituents want to enjoy these coastal waters, not be afraid to go in them. And it's a situation that cannot be allowed to continue. Now, I'm truly glad that the Conservatives have found some vim on this issue.
In opposition.
I'd like to gently remind them that we didn't come to power in a vacuum. We're facing a really Victorian situation with the amount of sewage, and that comes from a failure to deal with the systemic issues in the system. And despite their protestations, their actions have spoken louder than their words. Under the last government, we heard them talk of scrapping nutrient neutrality. They slashed the budgets of the Environment Agency. The then Water Minister instructed the Environment Agency not to publish data about. And we've heard all about the increase in monitoring. But if they knew so much about the problem, why didn't they do anything about it? So it's a little bit too late. And it is Labour that is bringing forward the legislation to deal with this issue. So I'm proud to support this bill, the provisions for criminal liability, banning bonuses, but particularly these amendments that the Minister has outlined today to improve transparency, to give industry certainty, and to speed up the implementation of these measures. They are so important. And I want to end just by saying my constituents in Bournemouth West will welcome the actions taken by the Labour government. We owe it to them and the next generation to leave this country with seas, rivers and an environment that is protected and is thriving.
Pete Van Mierlo.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome the Government's Special Measures Water Bill. While the provisions are modest, I nonetheless welcome this step to improve on the failures of previous Conservative governments on the issue of sewage pollution. For too long, water companies have been allowed to operate without proper regulation and oversight. Since privatisation, English water companies have paid out £83 billion in dividends while amassing £74 billion in debt. Shockingly, this bill still makes its way with this bill still making its way through the House, water companies have brazenly said that they plan to circumvent this ban on bonuses by jacking up C-suite salaries to compensate for the lack of bonuses. Therefore, this bill must do more and be more ambitious to truly hold water companies to account. I'm pleased to sponsor the amendments from my honourable friend for Westmorland and Lonsdale The amendments would strengthen the bill, improving monitoring, protecting consumers and making sure responsibility falls on sewerage companies to clean up their act. I'd like to speak to Amendments 9 and new clauses 11 and 21. Amendment 9 would ensure creditors, not bill payers, will pay for the bailout of water companies in special measures. Amendment 9 protects consumers against the reckless financial mismanagement of Thames Water. Ordinary bill payers should not be required to pay for the mistakes of a company they had no choice to use and the folly of investors that indulged them. I'd like to turn to new clause 11, which would require sewerage undertakers to install volume flow meters in all of their locations where overflows occur. Campaign organisations in my constituency of Henley and Thame, including the famous Henley mermaids, tell me that flow meters would help inform them of when it is safe to go in the water. New clause 21 is also of special importance to my constituency, much of which is within the Chilterns National Landscape. The clause would commit sewerage undertakers to secure and then maintain high ecological status in protected landscapes. It would require undertakers to improve outflow from storm overflows in areas like Goring, in my constituency, that lie within the Chilterns National Landscape. I know my right honourable friend, the member for Kingston and Surbiton, would very much welcome this, as we both enjoyed stand-up paddleboarding yoga in July in Goring. I will give way.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman giving way, and he paints a beautiful picture. How much does he think it would cost to implement that, and how much would that impact on bill payers?
Well, the measures we are proposing should be taken within the round, and all of the amendments we're putting forward significantly improve on the bill. This clause would also improve sewerage outflow in Henley and Thames and the villages along the Thames National Trail. This desperately is needed to end the shame of welcoming the world to our beautiful town of Henley at the Royal Regatta, only to subject them to what we put down the toilet. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome the bill and its protections that it delivers to my constituents, but I hope the Government will consider going further very soon.
Speaker, I'd like to thank the Minister for all the hard work that her and the team have been doing on this bill, and it's very, very important to my constituents in North East Derbyshire, because to go back to the very basics, we're talking about something that everybody in North East Derbyshire is using every day, water. I believe that everybody in my constituency, and indeed the whole country, has a right to know that the water in our rivers and streams is clean, clear and free from pollution. The fact that I have to state this now in this House is because we haven't had the action that we should have had over the past 14 years, and it has been a huge failure of the previous government to get action done and completed on this very important issue. Instead, what we saw in 2023 was that water in North East Derbyshire was polluted over 2,000 times, and that's just in one constituency. Just last week, I met with the local residents in Ashover, which is situated on the River Amber in my constituency, and they pressed on me their concerns about pollution that we have seen in that very picturesque part of the River Amber. Now, we have had good news in that Severn Trent has improved treatment tank capacity in the area, but what they are worried about is that this will not be enough, and that we will not know if it is enough, and they are already concerned that what they can see in the water is not living up to the standards that they wish to see. That's why I particularly welcome the fact that this bill is bringing in independent monitoring of the water quality. And I'm afraid I have to disagree with the Right Honourable Member for Westmorland and Lonsdale. What I think is important is not that we focus or get carried away with the volume, but it is the impact on the water quality that matters most. In truth, we've also seen... Yes, of course.
Because they're not mutually exclusive, are they? I mean, knowing how long a duration of a spill is important, but knowing what went into it and how much of it also helps to know what the impact is, so therefore we can regulate it. Isn't that true?
What I believe this bill does is it looks at the result of that sum, i.e. the impact. I don't really understand the reason why we need to look at the volume if we're looking at the impact. In truth, we have seen huge amounts spent on bosses' bonuses, over £9 million that we saw in 23-24. You know, to put that into perspective, the average salary in my constituency is just over £30,000, and if they are receiving bonuses, they expect it to be for work well done, and not just as a matter of course for the failings that they are responsible for. So, time and time again, we've heard that from the former government that the water industry would change. Unfortunately, it didn't under the previous measures, and that's why I welcome this action to make sure that we actually see results done as soon as possible. This bill will mean that we will see cleaner rivers, just like what I hope we will see in the River Amber and that my constituents deserve to see. Better infrastructure and better protection for those who use our waters for leisure activities and also for the protection of nature in our beautiful constituency, and that is why it has my full support.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituency of Bridgwater has the rivers Axe, Brew, Parrot and Toale within its boundaries, together with countless streams, brooks and rees. It's therefore of the utmost importance to my constituents that the water quality of our rivers is maintained and improved. The town of Burnham-on-Sea and Highbridge is a coastal resort, as are the villages of Barrow and Breen. It's important for the tourism industry and for local people who enjoy those beaches that we improve the quality of our bathing water. So I welcome the Water Special Measures Bill that is before us today. We've been told the bill has 4 key aims: to block bonuses for water company executives who pollute our waterways, to bring criminal charges against persistent lawbreakers, to impose automatic and severe fines for wrongdoing, and to enable independent monitoring of every sewer overflow outlet. I welcome all of these aims, building as they do on the work of the last government to improve our water quality. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to speak in favour of 2 new clauses this afternoon. First of all, new clause 16, the establishment of a water restoration fund. This establishes the principle that fines should go towards environmental improvement rather than the Treasury. And I'm somewhat curious as to why the government wouldn't support this. And perhaps the Minister can explain that when she comes to reply to the debate. In November 2024, Wessex Water, which serves my constituency, was fined £500,000 for polluting 2 rivers, one in Wiltshire and one in Somerset. That money should be used to improve the local environment. It should not be swallowed up by the Treasury. I also speak in favour of new clause 19, which states that where civil penalties are imposed, there is an equivalent reduction in customer bills. This is important because otherwise the water company that has been fined will simply pass on that fine to the consumers, and there is therefore no penalty to the customer. Again, I'm curious to know why the government would oppose new clause 19 along 18, and I look forward to hearing the Minister's answer when she replies. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to thank the ministerial team for all their hard work in bringing this bill forward within 6 months of Labour's election in July. Is there anything more emblematic of the decline and mismanagement presided over by the previous government than the state of our rivers and waters? It's been fascinating to listen to the Shadow Minister's statement that they suddenly seem to have realised that this is a bigger problem than they ever did when they were in government. As we have heard from members across the House, waterways across the country have been choked by record levels of sewage. In High Peak, in my constituency, in 2003, 39 sites were polluted by Severn Trent and United Utilities. Across these sites, there were 2,579 sewage dumps. And what punishment for the bosses of these companies? Did any of them face imprisonment? Were their bonuses curtailed or stopped entirely? Did they feel the hard edge of enforcement action? Madam Deputy Speaker, the answer is no. In 2002, United Utilities Chief Executive Officer received a bonus of nearly £1 million. And if the Shadow Minister would like to, I'm happy to give away.
Honourable Gentleman. I was just making the observation that if he is, as a backbench MP, presuming to tell a regulator with criminal powers how to investigate and prosecute companies or indeed any defendants, we do need to be very, very careful, because never before in our law have we permitted members of Parliament and ministers to direct independent investigators on who to investigate and prosecute.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the intervention from the Shadow Minister, but I would also suggest that perhaps if the laws in this bill had been implemented by her government, then we may have actually seen some of those enforcement actions. In 2002, the United Utilities Chief Executive received a bonus of nearly £1 million, and Severn Trent lifted its bonus to £3.36 million. I will give way.
Well, gentleman, for giving way. He's very kind. I would remind him that in 2002 there was a Labour government that allowed through its regulatory regime the uplift in the bonuses that he outlines. But between the years 1997 and 2010, can he outline to the House how much sewage dumping happened in his constituency? And can he justify why only 7% of rivers were being monitored? That he won't be able to, Madam Deputy Speaker, because we didn't know.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the intervention from the Minister. I would, the Honourable Member, I would simply say to him, 14 years in power and you did nothing. So therefore, to go back 30 years seems rather extraordinary. So that's millions of pounds, Madam Deputy Speaker, that my constituents in High Peak have put in the back pocket of bosses to reward their failure. When I've spoken to residents on the doorstep in High Peak, they ask me, how did they get away with it? How can they be allowed to do this? Madam Deputy Speaker, they got away with it because the members opposite let them. The previous Conservative government cut the Environment Agency's bill by half between 2010 and 2024, so perhaps that helps to understand the enforcement issues that we've been talking about. Leaving the agency toothless to tackle the disgraceful behaviour of our water company bosses. I also remember that just before the election that the Right Honourable Member for Keighley and Ilkley, in his previous role of Water Minister, told the Environment Agency officials not to put the headline figures of the total number and duration of spills. How typical of the party opposite to approach that they should face issues rather than face issues head-on and tackle them, that they chose to hide them and keep them in the shadows. This approach to government has left water infrastructure failing, by failing to confront these issues, to invest in our broken infrastructure and letting consumer money be spent irresponsibly. That's the money of my constituents in High Peak being let down twice by the Conservative Party. These points underpin the importance of this legislation. This bill is coupled with the government's wider programme to safeguard the environment, which will ensure the beauty of the Peak District in my constituency and our nature-rich rivers are entrenched for generations to come. This bill introduces tougher penalties, including imprisonment for water executives where they fail to comply with or obstruct investigations. The bill will ban bonuses for CEOs and senior leaders unless higher standards are met on protecting the environment and their consumers. And the bill will introduce severe and automatic fines for offences, closing the gap in the Environment Agency's enforcement powers. And importantly, the water companies will have to start covering the costs of enforcement action. Unlike the previous government, we won't let the water companies hide from their wrongdoing, and this bill will see that every outlet has independent monitoring. I am proud to support this major step forward in the government's wider reforms to fix the broken water system left behind by the members opposite. This is a great first step as we move forward, and there'll be a full commission looking at the whole water industry, which hopefully will address some of the concerns from other honourable members. Only by taking these actions with this ambitious plan will the government, in its first 6 months in office, can we begin to turn the page on years of decline and attract much needed investment into the sector, which will preserve the beauty of High Peak in the Peak District for the long term.
Unfortunately, colleagues making interventions have eaten up into time, and I now have to call the front bench. Shadow Minister Dr Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's been a wide-ranging debate, shorter than we had hoped for. But can I thank honourable members for participating today? Can I thank my honourable friend for Beaconsfield for her passion for enhancing the accountability of water companies and protecting water sports that we are all passionate about, and the honourable member for Bridgwater for passionately advocating for our Water Restoration Fund. New Clause 16, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Water Restoration Fund that will ring-fence fines to restore local waterways, not to balance the Treasury's books. This was a Conservative fund, and the Labour Party must not let ideology stand in the way of evidence-based policy making. Take the baton forward and ring-fence this money so that waterways can be restored locally. Though I have no time. In terms of new clause 19, fines on water companies should result in equivalent reductions in customers' bills. That is only fair, and we urge the government to take that forward. We've also wanted to strengthen the financial resilience of the water companies by making the Secretary of State be able to stipulate the limits of borrowing so that these companies do not leverage too much debt. And I think that's an important amendment that needs to go forward. And we also, with Amendments 26 and 27, we want to protect customers in different parts of the country so they don't have to pay for the misdemeanours of water companies that do not serve them. So we urge the government to take forward our amendments and make this bill stronger so that we can improve our precious waterways.
Thank you all. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you all for your constructive engagement throughout this debate. As I have said before, it is wonderful to hear the shared passion across this House for improving the performance of the water sector so that it better delivers for customers and the environment. Given the limited time I have to address over 50 amendments, not looking any one direction for the 50 amendments of which I'm responding to. Yes.
I'm very grateful to the Minister for giving way. She makes reference to the very limited time. Well, why is that? This is a government that has general debates on a Monday and on a Thursday. They have no business, and yet we have less than 2 hours to debate this really important issue.
I thank the honourable member, and obviously we served on the committee together where we spent much time discussing many of the amendments, but I cannot comment on decisions made in terms of the House and urgent questions. I will, as I say, do my absolute best to cover all of the points raised by honourable members, and I hope members do accept. I generally do try and be generous of interventions, but I really do want to put on the record some of my response to these amendments, so I hope you will forgive me. A number of honourable members have tabled amendments seeking to increase transparency around water company operations and pollution incidents. The government absolutely agrees that greater transparency is needed to better enable the regulators and the public to hold water companies accountable. And while I have previously explained why it is not practical to prohibit all discharges from emergency overflows, which are a necessary safety valve in our sewage system, I would like to reiterate this government's commitment to reducing the harm caused by sewage discharge. Ensuring all emergency overflows are monitored is a critical step in enabling the outcomes which we all want to see. Information on the frequency and duration of discharges will help to direct investment to further reduce sewage discharges into our waterways and better enable the public to make informed decisions about accessing their local waterways. I will, but I really have only 10 minutes.
Minister for being so generous with her time. As you'll be aware, we have chalk streams, most of the world's chalk streams in the United Kingdom. I've got the River Chess coming through my constituency of South West Hertfordshire. How can she ensure that we actually continue to monitor but also protect our unique environment with the threat of overflows that she's just referred to?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention, and I share his passion and love of chalk streams, the rainforests of the United Kingdom, Madam Deputy Speaker. And part of this bill will drive the performance change in the industry that we want to see and to reduce those sewer discharges that are doing such damage to such precious habitat. And while some members have called for the government to go even further on monitoring, I would like to reassure the House that the government has carefully considered how best to increase transparency without driving unmanageable increases in customer bills. And as promised during committee stage, I provided a fact sheet on this, and I can make it available in the House of Commons library. Rolling out event duration monitors over 2 price review periods will provide best value for money for customers and the environment, and does not risk compromising water companies' ability to deliver other vital improvements to our sewage system. It is important that we direct investment at improving the sewage network to decrease overflow charges, not just on monitoring, particularly where it does not provide valuable insight into the associated harms of discharge. There is a balance to be struck, and I believe we have got it right. The public knows there is too much sewage in the waterway. Whichever way we look at it, volume or duration, they know there's too much. The focus must be on reducing it. Of course, if it...
Okay. Thank you for giving way. My honourable friend there, right honourable friend, talks about the importance of knowing the quality of the water. I wonder if she would join me in commending campaigns like the Ilkley Clean River Group and other citizen scientists across the country who, in the absence of data from the party opposite and the work of the Environment Agency, had to do the work themselves to expose this sewage scandal.
I thank my honourable friend and wholeheartedly pay tribute to the Ilkley Clean Rivers Group and, can I say, to the work that she does championing them in this House. And I will quickly hear them.
Thank you very much. I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I would just like to remind her how much it matters to my constituents here in East Thanet, surrounded as we are both on three sides by sea, that we managed to clean up our water. However, I was struck by the fact that the Reform Manifesto did not mention in one word about water pollution or safety whatsoever. And I just simply wanted to remark about the emptiness of the benches opposite that should be put on the record for this House.
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention. I would have hoped and would have indeed thought this would be an important issue for all political parties.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Residents in Gromont, in my constituency of Scarborough and Whitby, have had a van parked in a street processing raw sewage with a pipe left open in the street for months between processing of the sewage and the holding tank being emptied. Does the honourable friend agree with me that disgusting incidents like this illustrate our crumbling water infrastructure and the importance of our bill, which will ring-fence funding for vital infrastructure?
I wholeheartedly agree with my honourable friend, and what a perfect example of the crumbling infrastructure that which we've inherited to see and hear what she's witnessing in the streets in her constituency. Now, if honourable members are okay, I will try and get through my remarks. Of course, if it becomes feasible in the future for companies to install monitors more quickly, then they will be encouraged to do so. In addition to reporting requirements for emergency overflows, other measures in this bill will ensure that water companies have robust plans to reduce pollution incidents and empower the regulator to punish wrongdoing effectively. This includes requirements to produce pollution incident reduction plans and implementation reports as set out in Clause 2 of this bill, and requirements for water companies to consider the use of nature-based solutions in the production of their drainage and wastewater management plans as set out. I will make a bit more and then I will. As set out in Clause 4. The transparency provided by these measures will drive a culture change, ensuring that water companies have the right incentives to reduce discharges of sewage into our precious rivers, lakes and seas. Let me be clear, the bill also provides comprehensive powers for Ofwat to enforce the requirements introduced by this bill to increase transparency, including through the use of significant fines. And I can reassure the House that where discharges are found to have breached permit conditions, the regulator will not hesitate to take action. I would also like to make clear in relation to new Clause 14 that Ofwat have a duty to secure that companies are able to finance the delivery of their statutory obligations, including meeting pollution targets. The Government is committed to acting as fast as possible to reduce sewage pollution in our waterways and already has stretching pollution targets in place, informed by detailed analysis and extensive engagement. These targets will drive £60 billion of investment between 2025 and 2050, and almost £12 billion of that investment will begin this year, improving 2,800 storm overflows by 2030. I hope this reassures the House that where water companies do not comply with requirements around pollution incidents and reporting on these pollution incidents, the regulator will not hesitate to take action. A number of... Oh, quickly, I will.
Thank you for giving way on that point. And given that the Water Restoration Fund, which was created by the former government, not one penny of the £11 million levied on water companies between 22 and 23 reached any of the restoration of waterways, would the Minister agree with us that our precious chalk streams could be helped by the Water Restoration Fund being continued?
As I mentioned before the member up there, I'm a huge fan of the chalk streams, and she's right to point out that the much lauded Water Restoration Fund, which members are so keen to talk about, which was established in November 2022, 18 months later delivered the grand total of zero. Number of projects supported by this. A number of honourable members have also put forward suggestions to improve information and data sharing more broadly, and I know the member for Beaconsfield mentioned put a name to some of these amendments. Although the government does not think it's necessary to bring forward legislation in this space, we are actively considering ways of making data more accessible to the public through non-legislative means. This includes information on water companies' performance and data on local sewage networks in map form, which must be made available free of charge under the Water Industry Act. In addition... Okay. This is going to be my last...
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm very grateful to the Minister for giving way, and her comments about this point will be welcomed by many of our local residents. I also wish to ask her to provide further information about the greater powers for Ofwat as she finds up her remarks.
So this bill will, of course, empower Ofwat to take action necessary where we found wrongdoing with changes of the Clause 1 around remuneration, and I know this is something my honourable friend cares a lot about. I will have to, I'm really sorry, I am going to have to stop interventions to respond to all of the amendments. In addition, Water UK have published a centralised map of discharge data from all storm overflows operated by English water companies on a website. I genuinely found this clear and useful, so I would honestly encourage all members to have a look at that. So I've also heard calls from across this House for reforms to the planning frameworks, the regulators and the incentives that govern the water industry model. While I understand, and believe me, I fully share honourable members' frustrations with the performance across the water sector, the fundamental issues facing the water industry and the regulatory framework it operates in can no longer be addressed in a piecemeal way. I've spoken at great length throughout this bill's passage about the independent commission led by Sir John Conliffe, which will make recommendations to fundamentally transform how our water system works. It's bringing together a wide range of expertise and is broad-ranging, making recommendations in line with 8 objectives to deliver the necessary reset to ensure a resilient, innovative and sustainable water sector in England and Wales, and it will report to the government by summer 25. This includes specific objectives to review the roles, structures, duties and powers of the regulators, planning frameworks, including the price review process and the resilience of water companies, including, and I know this matters to many honourable members, financial resilience. To briefly address the points raised around taking water companies into public ownership, the Government has repeatedly made clear that we are not considering nationalisation in the scope of the Commission. It would cost over £90 billion. It would take years to unpick the current ownership model at the expense of delivering and addressing the more immediate public priorities. However, the Commission will consider alternative water industry models within its scope. I would like to take this opportunity to invite all honourable members to put forward their views to the Commission through the upcoming call for evidence, which will be launching soon. It is also important... Very quickly, go on.
I'm grateful to the Minister for giving way. If I suspect that the government does not agree with our Water Restoration Fund, if the Cunliffe Review actually says the Water Restoration Fund should be reinstated, can she give a commitment that they will do that?
Good. Thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention. And I have to say, despite our political differences, we've had a very interesting and sort of, what's the right word, camaraderie debate in through the committee stage. In terms of the Water Restoration Fund, as we've explained during committee, conversations are still going. I honestly don't believe it needs primary legislation. I know the front bench know that because they established it without primary legislation, so they know it doesn't need primary legislation because it already exists. And I do have to gently point out as well that, as I have already mentioned, within the 18 months of which it was established under the previous government, it did absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. I've got
3 minutes. I really do need to. I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to skip through as much as I can, because I know there were some questions, particularly around the SAR, that members will want me to respond to. But just quickly on rules on remuneration and governance. Some honourable members have expressed concerns around rules and performance-related pay and consumer representation. While the government agrees it is crucial voices of consumers are heard and considered in water company decision-making, we have already taken action on this. It is not necessary to require that environment experts are placed on company boards, because following the agreement made with my honourable friend, the Secretary of State, in his first week in office, 9 of the 16 companies have updated their Articles of Association to include a social and environmental commitment, and DEFRA is working with all to ensure that they do the rest as soon as possible. And as regards, and I have to say the honourable member opposite actually made this point, which I agreed with. As regards representation of E&GOs on company boards, members of water company boards are subject to a number of duties under the Companies Act 2006, including a duty to promote the success of the company. These fiduciary duties of the appointed director may conflict with the organisational objectives of the environmental group in question, thus preventing them from participating objectively in a board membership. We can't, a situation where you'd potentially have an environmentalist having to go on a board of a water company with a duty to promote the success of that company is not something they're comfortable with. As a special SAR. Right, okay. I produced a fact sheet detailing on how SAR is used to ensure the continued provision of vital public services. However, I will remind the House of the facts and being very clear. The shortfall recovery power can only be used to recover shortfalls in repaying government funding. For the last time, I hope, Madam Deputy Speaker, it cannot and it would never be used to recover financial creditor or shareholder losses relating to investment in the company. And if the amendments were taken as proposed, it would involve a radical change to insolvency policy, which has been a long-established practice since 1986.
The question is that new clause 18 be read a second time. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is that new clause 18 be added to the bill. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. New clause 16 has been selected for separate decision. I call Victoria Atkins to move new clause 16 formally. Colin. Oh. The question is that new clause 16 be read a second time. Forgive me. New clause 16 to be added to the bill, and the question is that new clause 16 obviously be added to the bill. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. On the contrary, no. No. Declare the lobby.
The question is, as on the order paper, as many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. Tellers for the ayes, Paul Holmes and Gregory Stafford. Tellers for the noes, Gerald Jones, Anna Mockmurran. No.
The ayes to the right, 181. The noes to the left, 322.
Close.
The ayes were 181, the noes were 322, so the noes have it, the noes have it. Unlocked. New clause 19 has been selected for a separate decision. I call Victoria Atkins to move new clause 19 formally. The question is that new clause 19 be added to the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. Division, clear the lobby. The question is, as on the order paper, as many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. Tell us for the ayes, Paul Holmes and Gregory Stafford. Tell us for the noes, Gerald Jones and Anna McMurran.
180. The noes to the left, 325.
The ayes were 180, the noes were 325, so the noes have it, unlocked. We now come on to Government Amendment 4. I call the Minister to move the amendment formally. The question is that Amendment 4 be made. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Amendment 9 has been selected for a separate decision. I call Tim Farron to move the amendment formally.
Move formally.
The question is that Amendment 9 be made. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. Division, clear the lobby. The question is, as on the order paper, as many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. Tellers for the ayes, Tessa Munt, Bobby Dean. Tellers for the noes, Anna Mottmurray, Gerald Jones. Order, order.
The ayes to the right, 73. The noes to the left, 321.
The ayes were 73, the noes were 321. The noes have it, the noes have it. Unlock. We now come to Government Amendments 5 to 8. I call the Minister to move amendments formally. The question is that Government Amendments 5 to 8 be made. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Consideration completed. Third reading.
No.
Minister to move third reading. Secretary of State, Steve Reid.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that this bill be read a third time. Our rivers, lakes and seas are awash with pollution. The legacy of 14 years of Conservative failure is the highest level of sewage spills on record, economic growth held back by a lack of water supplies, and now painful bill rises to fix the problems they left behind. The British public are rightly angry about the state of our waterways. It has been left to this government to clean up the mess once and for all. The water sector needs a complete reset. It needs reform that puts customers and the environment first, and a new partnership with the government to invest for the future and upgrade our broken infrastructure. This government has a three-stage plan to make that happen. During my very first week in post, I met with water company chief executives and announced immediate steps to improve the performance of the water industry, including ring-fencing money earmarked for investment in water infrastructure so it can never again be diverted for bonuses or dividends, and ensuring that customers who face frequent water outages or contaminated tap water receive more generous and faster compensation. This evening, I'm delighted to open the debate on the third reading of the Water Special Measures Bill. The core provisions of this bill strengthen the power of the regulators so they can better hold water companies to account for poor performance. It gives Ofwat new powers to ban undeserved bonuses when water company executives fail to meet the high standards the public rightly demand. It will introduce stricter penalties, including imprisonment, where senior executives in water companies obstruct investigations by environmental regulators, and it includes provisions for automatic and severe fines for wrongdoing. We've also extended powers so the environmental regulators can recover costs for a wider range of future enforcement. The polluter, not the public, will pay. And we've introduced mandatory monitoring of emergency overflows and pollution incidents so the public can hold companies to account. The bill has been strengthened and improved in its passage through both houses. I'm thankful to all honourable members and all noble lords in the other place for their thorough consideration and scrutiny of the bill, and for the many and varied amendments that have been suggested and debated. Water companies will now be required to include water supply as well as sewage-related incidents in pollution incident reduction plans, and we have created personal liability for chief executives so there is accountability for these plans at the very highest level. Water companies will also need to produce an implementation report alongside their annual plans so the public can see what action they're taking to reduce pollution incidents. We've introduced two clauses to consider more nature-based solutions, such as reed beds and wetlands in drainage and wastewater management plans, and for Ofwat to track progress against our environmental targets. A further clause will ensure measures are in place to support vulnerable customers, as set out by my honourable friend, the Minister for Water, in her speech earlier this evening.
Would the Minister give way?
Yes, of course.
Thank Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I wonder whether the Secretary would join me in commending the citizen scientists and the local campaign groups that have really driven many of these issues right up the political agenda, including my own in the Friends of the River in Exeter. And I'm also delighted this government has acted so quickly to hold the water companies to account for the sewage crisis. And does he agree with me that this is both long overdue and will fundamentally change the way that our rivers are treated?
Well, I thank him for his intervention, which I agree with, and I share his commendation for the citizen scientists and the work that they have done to highlight the scale of the problem. Now, the support for this bill across the House and by the public demonstrates our collective desire to clean up our rivers, lakes and seas. I am proud of the progress we've made through the Water Special Measures Bill, but this is not the extent of our ambition. In October, I announced the biggest review of the water sector in a generation. Sir John Cunliffe has appointed an expert advisory group with leading voices from the environment, public health, engineering, customers, investors and economics, and is preparing to launch a public call for evidence within weeks.
He talks about Sir John Cunliffe's Water Commission, and we're obviously interested in engaging with that. Does he think that the appointment of a former executive of Thames Water to that commission today is going to fill the public with confidence that this is going to be independent in any way?
I thank him for his intervention, and of course it's an independent commission, so it's up to Sir John to appoint to the board who he likes. But it is a very balanced board, and I hope that he will recognise that voices from many stakeholder groups are represented and indeed should be represented. The Commission will report to the UK and Welsh governments this summer. Both governments will then respond and consult on Sir John's recommendations, including on further legislation.
On that point, will he give way?
Yes.
I thank the Secretary of State for giving way, and he's right, things are getting better. In my own constituency, there are 2 new investments in water sector upgrades, first by Wessex Water and another by Pennon, and it's worth £230 million in total. Now, clearly, much more has to be done, but would he join me in welcoming these new investments? And would he also recognise that these investments are not consistently across our country, which is exactly why we need to have this bill?
I thank him for his intervention, and of course I welcome those investments. I know from visiting him in his constituency what a champion he is for cleaning up the water on the beaches in Bournemouth. I'd like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Kingston upon Hull West and Haltemprice, and the noble lady, Baroness Hayman of Ulloch, for their expert leadership of this bill through Parliament, and members of the staff in the bill team and in DEFRA for their hard work and their professionalism. My thanks also to members on all sides who have participated in the debate at all stages, and I extend my thanks to our colleagues in the Welsh Government and the Senedd for working collaboratively with the UK Government on this bill. I am delighted to see that at the Welsh Government's own request, the benefits brought about by this bill will extend to Wales. Yes.
The consumers out there listening to this third reading and this presentation, they are concerned and have been about the role of Ofwat until today. What reassurance can the Minister give to the consumers that Ofwat, the regulator, will put the consumers' interests and environmental interests before the corporation's interests?
I thank him for his intervention. Now, Sir John Cunliffe's commission will be reviewing precisely those points, and I hope the honourable gentleman will take the opportunity to contribute his views when the call for evidence begins in just a few weeks from today. The changes that this government has made in a short amount of time show that with collective determination and ambition, we can turn the water sector around. The failures of the past are ending. The future of the water sector is full of promise. Madam Deputy Speaker, our waterways have been poisoned by unacceptable levels of sewage and other pollution for too long. With these changes, finally, we will clean up our rivers, lakes and seas for good.
The question is that the bill be now read a third time. Shadow Secretary of State Victoria Atkins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I start by thanking everyone who has scrutinised and worked on this bill in both houses, including my Shadow Minister, my honourable friend, the member for Epping Forest, and indeed our very efficient whip, my honourable friend, the member for Broadlands, and of course the noble Lord Roborough, who led very constructive discussions in the other place. It's a shame that the government has rejected some of those amendments that were put forward today. I'd also like to thank the doorkeepers, the honourable members who chaired the committee, and of course everyone who helped His Majesty's official opposition to scrutinise this bill. Across this House, we can all agree that there are fundamental problems facing the water and sewerage industry. And since 2010, the number of designated bathing waters has increased. We've seen a significant improvement in water quality ratings, with more waters rated as excellent or good, and an increase in blue flag beaches. But of course, we want to see more. We were, in fact, the first government in history to set out that storm overflows must be reduced, and our landmark Environment Act of 2021 gave stronger powers to regulators and imposed strict demands for tackling pollution. We set legally binding targets to improve water quality and availability and to reduce nutrient pollution, and we rolled out catchment-sensitive farming to all farms in England. We stepped up the requirements for investment, including investment from water companies in storm overflow improvements and nationally significant infrastructure projects such as the Thames Tideway Tunnel Super Sewer. And when we came into government, just 7% of storm overflows were monitored. When we left government, we had increased that to 100%. Now, we support this bill this evening, but we do so with some disappointment at its lack of ambition. Frankly, as we have said before, much of what the bill tries to do includes monitoring, blocking bonuses and fines. These were brought in by the Conservatives in government, and we say that primary legislation isn't necessary, but we will, of course, support this bill. I am particularly disappointed that the government has declined to accept our amendments. In particular, it is woeful that the government has failed to put into legislation the Water Restoration Fund. The public rightly wants to see the government addressing water quality, and I'll be dealing with the Shadow Minister's comments in a moment. The public rightly wants to see the government addressing water quality, and yet rather than use water company fines to restore water bodies, that money will now be going into the gaping hole of the Treasury's coffers, presumably to try and undo some of the damage caused by the Chancellor's disastrous growth-blocking, tax-hiking, job-cutting and investment-plummeting budget. Now, I'm going to correct the Shadow Minister, and I will do it here at the dispatch box rather than through a point of order. Last summer, it emerged that Thames, Yorkshire and Northumbrian... I won't on this. Last summer, it emerged that Thames, Yorkshire and Northumbrian Water would be fined a record £160 million between them for a catalogue of failure over illegal sewage discharges subject to consultation. Yet in August, when this government was in power, the Treasury held back those fines which were due to go into the Water Restoration Fund to help clean up affected areas. So the Shadow Minister gave figures earlier. It is her government's fault that money was not paid into that fund. That's because on this side of the House we believe that the polluter should pay for their mistakes rather than paying for trade union pay rises at the cost of their trade union buddies. The government has also... I'm sure the train drivers are very grateful. I will give way with great interest.
I thank the Right Honourable Lady for giving way. I sat on the Public Bill Committee and I must say the tone that she's striking is a very different tone to that of her colleagues on the Bill Committee. I just wonder, does she have any regrets about her government's record in terms of tackling sewage or pollution? Would she acknowledge any regrets?
So I do love being mansplained to by Labour backbenchers. I suppose it's part of the Labour Party's women problem. What I will say, throughout this throughout this legislation, he's now throwing his fingers up at me, or his thumbs up at me, goodness me. What I will say actually through this bill is that we have said we have made some progress, but there is more to do, which is precisely why we are supporting this bill tonight, albeit we tried to improve it and strengthen it. I'm not going to, I'm afraid, because I'm going to allow others to take part. I'm going to say that the government has also sadly failed to recognise the importance of chalk streams, refusing to confirm the continuation of protections put in place by we Conservatives. I'm afraid warm words about rainforests, much as we agree with them, will not protect these vital habitats. We all want to see improved water quality, and I urge the government to take stock and seek to bring forward a more rounded approach that cleans up our rivers and seas, treats bill payers and taxpayers properly, and builds on our work to construct the water systems of the future.
Yeah.
The question is that the bill be... Tim Farron.
How about that? Madam Deputy Speaker, very grateful. Without going through all the kind of flowery stuff we did earlier on, I am grateful to colleagues on all sides for what has been broadly a collegiate debate. But the Shadow Secretary of State just said something actually worth reflecting upon. I think she's talking about the same thing that I'm referring to, which is the 164 million that Ofwat had indeed put in terms of fines against 3 water companies, the very 3 she mentioned. For what it's worth, and I am not here to defend the Treasury, it wasn't a Treasury decision at all. It was Ofwat's weakness, a culture of frankly timidity when it comes to gathering the money from the water companies that meant that money was not collected, which is a reminder, it's 100% right, because it's in response to one of my Freedom of Information Act requests. But in any event, the key feature is this. This is the disappointment I have with this bill, so I absolutely will support it too, should it come to a vote, and I do support it. But the weakness in the bill is the fact that it is not radical enough, it doesn't go far enough, and it doesn't tackle the weakness in regulation that in a roundabout accidental way the Shadow Secretary of State has indicated. And so we are sure that we will absolutely engage with the Cunliffe review, the water review, and recognise it as independent. My reflection is simply this. The Labour Party has been in opposition for a long time. They were a well-funded opposition through short money. We could only dream of such things, and surely had the capability to have come up with a set of plans which meant they got on with it straight away rather than kicking on to halfway into the Parliament. So I think it is an unambitious bill, but it is a bill that is good enough, and it will have our support.
The question is that the bill be now read the 3rd time. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Point of order.
Point of order, Jerome Mayhew.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful, but I need some assistance to understand how the House can express its displeasure at the government's manipulation of the business of this House to stop proper consideration of this bill. Water was right at the heart of the last general election. It's really important to our constituents, and yet we've had a report stage which has been limited to less than 1.5 hours, and a 3rd reading where not a single backbencher has been able to contribute. Is there a way, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we can express our disapprobation of the government putting forward 2 non-urgent statements today, both on Gaza and Sudan and the Eastern DRC, both of them important in their own right, but I suspect designed to eat up time?
I thank the member for his prior notice, and whilst this is not a matter for the Chair, his comments are now on the record. I'll give a... Leader of the House.
As I'm here, Madam Deputy Speaker, can I just gently refute what the honourable gentleman just said there? Yes, these were 2 important statements put on today. It is a matter for the Chair as well to decide on urgent questions which were also put on today, both of which ran for considerable time too. It was not the government's intention at all for this important debate today, which is a matter of great importance to many people across the House, for that debate to be curtailed. So I'll certainly take on board what he says, and there will be further opportunities potentially with this bill. There will be statements tomorrow, and there were statements earlier this week. There's lots of important matters, and we also take great importance to make sure that important government updates are made to this House through the use of oral statements. And we're criticised when we don't do that, Madam President.